We are joined for more by our New York correspondent, Sherwin Bryce-Pease. Sherwin, a very good evening to you. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to the Globe.
Good to see you, Simpiwe.
What could possibly have necessitated the change of heart on President Donald Trump? We've seen in that news conference saying that the better you do, the faster this nightmare will end.
Facts, science, data, things that you want the president to consider when he makes decisions about reopening the U.S. government. He had a meeting Sunday before his press conference in the Rose Garden at the White House, where he had the likes of Dr. Anthony Fauci, the head of the infectious diseases unit in the federal government, the chairperson, the coordinator of the task force, Dr. Deborah Birx, and they all sat around and presented him with the data that said between 100,000 and 200,000 people could die. In fact, Deborah Birx on one of the news channels earlier this morning said that was a best case scenario. They also showed the president, Simpiwe, a projection that had the United States not done anything in terms of mitigation, in terms of COVID-19, that some 2.2 million people could die. So these numbers, these figures really shook the president into the reality that we are seeing on the ground in places like New York, but also in places now like Michigan, Detroit, Michigan, in Chicago, Illinois, in New Orleans, Louisiana, in Washington State and California, where you're also seeing an uptick in the numbers, Simpiwe, as testing expands around the country.
Well, some White House skeptics are showing concerned that the experts such as Dr. Birx could be putting faith in models that may not necessarily prove to be accurate in the end, given the unknowns.
Well, look, the models are there as a precautionary measure, right? But I must say, we are already seeing over 2,000, what's the number? 2,000 deaths in the United States, over 1,000 in New York. And Dr. Fauci was also saying on one of the news shows earlier, Simpiwe, that a very bad seasonal flu in the year 2017, 2018 claimed 60,000 lives. And his argument is that the coronavirus outbreak globally is worse than that seasonal flu in 2017-18, and that's why their figures are at about 100,000, between 100,000 and 200,000. So just looking at seasonal flu, a very bad dose of it, if you will, in 2017, and the number was 60,000. So that puts it into some perspective as to the difficulties facing experts in terms of predictions, but also basing it on past experiences as it relates to the flu.
Well, President Trump watched in horror as the stock markets plummeted to its worst lows since Black Monday in 1987, and the business leaders were frantic and called President Trump, expressing their panic at the recommendation of staying at home. So I guess then it is a tough balancing act between saving lives and saving the economy, of course, which is under threat, and seeing that the stock market is President Trump's personal barometer for success.
Well, it's not everybody's barometer for success, right? And in terms, and when you're dealing with a public health emergency, every expert that we speak to and all the governors that really are, the hands-on officials in terms of what's going on at the state level, and mayors that are, hands-on in terms of what's going at the very local level, all they have been telling us is that we have to deal with the public health emergency first and then plan for the reopening of the U.S. economy when the data and the science tells us that will be safe to do. There's no point in opening up the economy when you have not yet flattened the curve, Simpiwe, because you might reopen schools, you might reopen businesses, and then only have to reshut them again. And that double blow to the U.S. economy, to the markets that is the president's barometer, that will be a double whammy, if you will. So erring on the side of caution here, we've seen the president move his date from Easter, April 15th to April 30th. But again, we don't know that April 30th is set in stone. We don't know, as President Ramaphosa in South Africa has talked about, opening schools in the middle of April. We don't know that that's actually going to happen. It will be based on the data, and certainly will not be based on what the markets are doing at any point in time.
It certainly is a national emergency. It's not a democratic crisis, nor is it a Republican crisis. So do you get a sense that there is some sort of collaboration between those parties?
Very much so. In fact, the federal government has sent a 1,000-bed Navy ship called Comfort that arrived in New York earlier today, and it's docked now at Pier 50 in Manhattan. And what this 1,000-bed facility, the ship, essentially with, I believe, 18 operating rooms, some 80 ICU beds, it's going to relieve the pressure that is currently being experienced by hospitals on the mainland. People are facing a huge amount of pressure in terms of the volume of people coming into the hospital and, of course, the volume of people leaving in body bags in Piwe. 500 dead in New York on Saturday, over 200 dead on Sunday, and those numbers continue to rise while these health workers and frontline responders are facing shortages of equipment, shortages of masks and gloves and protective gear and ventilators. So the federal government is collaborating. They've sent the ship to assist, and the ship will only be dealing with non-COVID-19 patients, basically to take all those other people out of the health system so that those hospitals can focus just on coronavirus patients. In addition, you're seeing a number of field hospitals. A field hospital has opened up in Central Park here, and in addition, another 1,000-bed facility in a convention center known as the Javits Center here in Manhattan is also now ready to receive patients. So you have seen the federal government collaborate. It might not be a perfect science. Governors and mayors are not entirely happy with the response we've seen, but there has been some action put behind the words from the White House, and we're seeing these temporary facilities that are a federal mandate to erect. The instruction from the president to the Army Corps of Engineers has been to erect these temporary facilities, and we are seeing that now come to the force in Piwe.
And then do you get a sense then that, all the presidential people, or rather the presidential candidates who are running for office, do you think then that they will be dumping their presidential campaigns?
Well, you don't dump the campaign. I mean, I think we were sort of at the end of the Democratic primary process where it kind of looked like Joe Biden was going to secure the nomination and steal it from the hands of Bernie Sanders. I must say this coronavirus outbreak has really focused attention on what people in government are doing and not necessarily what people who are running for government have to say. Joe Biden has now reevaluated his posture, because everybody's under quarantine. He's a late 70s person running for office. He can't exactly be out there greeting people and shaking hands. So he's quarantined at his home in Delaware and has been trying now increasingly some period to find time on the cable news channels on giving interviews from his home. But the focus very much on what the president is saying in his daily press conferences, and certainly what governors like Andrew Cuomo are doing. So this has been really hard, I think, for presidential candidates trying to find a platform to air their views while people are dealing with a public health emergency here, and where they don't have the levers of government to actually impact the response you're seeing on the ground.
All right, Sherwin, thank you so much for your time. That was our New York correspondent, Sherwin Bryce-Pease. We take a quick break now, and the Globe will be back shortly thereafter.